The 2020s are the first decade since the 1930s to not include either George Blanda or John Carney playing pro football. Blanda was drafted by the Bears in 1949 and started out as the team's kicker, although he also started at quarterback for a few years in the 50s. He actually retired after the 1958 season after his role in the passing game had gradually diminished. However, when the AFL started in 1960, Blanda joined the Oilers, becoming their quarterback for the next 7 seasons before moving to the Raiders to be a backup QB and kicker. His career ended in 1975 at age 48 after he had played a record 26 seasons. This brings us to John Carney, who was undrafted in 1987 but had his first NFL game time in '88 with the Bucs. Carney finally won a Super Bowl with the Saints in 2009 and played until 2010. There you go, 8 decades for 2 players. There have been 76 NBA Finals series in league history, and the team that has scored the most total points has lost 11 times. It's happened 3 times this century. The first was in the 2000 NBA Finals, when Shaq and Kobe won their first ring together by beating the Pacers 4-2. However, the Pacers scored 11 more points during the series. In the 2005 NBA Finals, the Spurs beat the Pistons in 7 but were outscored by 13 points. But roles were reversed in the 2013 Finals when the Spurs lost to the Heat in 7 despite scoring 5 more total points. The biggest point differential in a losing performance came in the 1958 Finals, when the Celtics lost to the Hawks in 6 games despite outscoring them by 27 points. All 4 Hawks wins were by a combined 8 points. In 1877, Jim Devlin pitched every single inning for the Louisville Grays. Typically, MLB teams have 5-man starting rotations, with pitchers topping out at about 200 innings in a season. However, that wasn't always the case, with Devlin taking it to extremes. Devlin joined the Louisville Grays in 1876, the first year of the National League. The Grays went 30, 36, and 3 that season, with Devlin throwing 622 innings. All other pitchers on the team combined for only 21 innings. The following season, the Grays went 35 and 25 as Devlin pitched all 559 innings for the team. However, Devlin was one of 4 players from that team who received lifetime bans after it was found that they accepted money to throw games. Follow for more sports stories like this one. The 1989 Bengals are the best team in NFL history that finished last in their division. The year before, the Bengals earned the number 1 seed in the AFC with a 12-4 record and a plus 119 point differential. They reached the Super Bowl before losing to the 49ers. In 1989, the Bengals had that same plus 119 point differential, which was the 3rd best in the NFL. Yet, they only went 8-8, missing the playoffs while the entire rest of the AFC Central made the playoffs. The Bengals blew out opponents by all of these final scores, yet scored 17 or fewer points 6 times, all in losses, and went 2-5 in 1-score games. Those Bengals had the best point differential of any team that missed the playoffs in NFL history and are the only team in the Super Bowl era to score 56 or more points in 2 games. The worst free throw shooting performance in NBA history was done by Nets big man Chris Dudley. There have been many terrible free throw shooters in NBA history, including Shaq, Wilt Chamberlain, Dwight Howard, and Ben Wallace. Shaq even has the most recorded free throw attempts in a game without a make, with 11. But the worst performance of all came in an April 1990 game where the Pacers beat the Nets 124-113. Chris Dudley shot 1 of 18 from the line in a game where he finished with 9 points and 12 rebounds. Had he gone even 12 of 18 from the line, 67%, the game would have went to overtime. Dudley shot below 46% from the line for his career and once missed 5 free throws in a single trip after 3 lane violations were called. Follow for more crazy sports stats like this one. The 2000 St. Louis Rams allowed 29.4 points per game, the most in the NFL. But they made the playoffs anyways because they had the number 1 scoring offense in the league too. Quarterbacks Kurt Warner and Trent Green combined to throw for nearly 5,500 yards and 37 touchdowns. Meanwhile, running back Marshall Faulk won league MVP with nearly 2,200 scrimmage yards and 26 touchdowns. The Rams allowed 29 points per game in their first 6 contests, but scored at least 37 points in all of those games to start 6-0. I especially want to point out this Week 5 game against the Chargers, who were actually quarterbacked by Jim Harbaugh. The Rams scored on all of their first 11 possessions before kneeling to end the game. This is how the Rams allowed 2 more points per game than any other team that has ever made the playoffs. Rickey Henderson is one of those players whose numbers are so ridiculous, it's difficult to believe he even existed. Today we're going to focus on his steals. For his career, Henderson had 1,406 steals. No other player in MLB history is over 1,000. That record seems pretty safe to me, considering that the active steals leader isn't even a quarter of the way there. Henderson led the American League in steals a whopping 12 times, including in each of his first 7 full seasons. But perhaps most impressively, he led all of Major League Baseball in stolen bases with 66 when he was 39 years old. No player has stolen that many bases in any of the last 10 seasons, and of all players aged 39 or older, only 2 have reached even half of Henderson's total of 66 stolen bases in one season. The 2005 Green Bay Packers went 4-12, tied for their worst record in the Super Bowl era. They went 1-7 in the first half of the season, but get this, over those games they had a +9 point differential. At that point, they had lost 4 games by 3 points or less. All of their losses were by a combined 40 points, meaning that their one win was a big one. In the middle of a horrific season, the Packers won 52-3 at home against the Saints in Week 5. The Saints actually scored first in this game, making it the biggest blowout in NFL history by a team that didn't score first. This was the Packers' biggest blowout since 1966, the year they won Super Bowl I. With the outcome already decided, Aaron Rodgers came in the 4th quarter and completed his first NFL pass. Follow for more sports stats. Shams Charania is reporting that the Rockets are sending Christian Wood to the Mavericks for the number 26 pick in this year's draft and a collection of players. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of analysis on this one, but I've got the most important fact from this trade. After starting his career with the Spurs and spending the last 3 seasons with the Mavericks, new Houston Rocket Boban Marjanovic has officially conquered the state of Texas. The 1947 Chicago Bears were the strangest offensive powerhouse in NFL history. They led the league in scoring by almost 5 points per game and became the first team to average 30 points per game in 4 seasons. But the way they got their points was incredibly unusual. They scored 53 touchdowns, but failed to make a single field goal. In fact, they attempted just 1. They averaged nearly 5 turnovers per game, and starting quarterback Sid Luckman became the first player to ever throw at least 30 interceptions in one season. They didn't have a single player average at least 30 rushing yards per game, but they're tied for the NFL record with 11 players with at least 50 rushing yards. The Bears went 8-4, but lost both of their games to the Cardinals, who beat them by 1 game for the NFL's Western Division title. My favorite NBA box score comes from December 1961, when Elgin Baylor and Jerry West led the Lakers to a victory over Wilt Chamberlain's Warriors in triple overtime, 151-147. This comes from the season where Chamberlain averaged more than 50 points and 25 rebounds per game, and he blew those numbers away in this one. Chamberlain had 78 points, 43 rebounds, and shot the ball 93 times between field goal and free throw attempts. He also lost. Baylor led the way for the Lakers with a ridiculous 63 points and 31 rebounds. Meanwhile, the logo Jerry West casually had a 30-point triple-double. 6 players fouled out, and this is the only game on record where both teams had at least 90 rebounds. Chamberlain would join the Lakers later in his career, but this 1961 duel was legendary. I want to show you one of my favorite stats from the 2021 NFL season. Of the 86 players who had at least 55 carries last season, the bottom 5 in yards per attempt all played for the Houston Texans. When you hear that, it's no surprise the Texans had the worst rushing offense in the NFL. 3 of the 6 seasons with the most home runs in MLB history belong to Sammy Sosa, but he didn't win the home run title in any of them. Let me explain. Entering 1998, the record for most home runs in a season was 61 by Roger Maris. Sammy Sosa beat that mark with 66, but fell short of Mark McGwire's 70. It was a similar story in 1999, when Sosa's 63 were bested by McGwire's 65. Sosa was back at it again in 2001 with 64 home runs. Yet that didn't even come close to Barry Bonds' 73, the current all-time record. That's how you get a single-season home run list that looks like this. Funny enough, Sosa did win 2 home run titles around this time, just with far fewer homers. And yes, steroids, but I don't think that makes this any less wild. Utah Jazz center Mark Eaton was the most dominant shot blocker in NBA history. The 7'4" behemoth led the NBA in blocked shots 4 times and was named Defensive Player of the Year twice in his 11 seasons. Eaton averaged a ridiculous 3.5 blocks per game for his career, easily the most since blocks have been tracked. In 84-85, he averaged a record 5.6 blocks per game for the entire season. No one's averaged 4 blocks per game in more than 25 years, and last season, the leader only had 2.3. In 84-85, Eaton had at least 10 blocks 6 times and at least 8 blocks 20 times. But my favorite stat? He had at least 2 blocks in 81 of 82 games, including 74 straight to finish the season. Charlie Hennigan is one of the greatest receivers you have never heard of. He played for the AFL's Houston Oilers from 1960 to 66 and was a key part of the high-powered offenses that won the AFL's first 2 championships. In 1961, Hennigan broke the single-season receiving yards record by 251 yards. His new record of 1,746 yards would stand for another 34 seasons. And because Hennigan did it in a 14-game season, he finished with more receiving yards per game than any of these guys. 3 years later, Hennigan led the AFL in receiving yards again and became the first player to ever catch at least 100 passes in a single season. And the craziest part? Before the AFL started in 1960, Hennigan was working as a high school biology teacher.